Fifth house in astrology is the house of good fortune. It's the place of play, joy, romance, and children. It's the place that represents all things that put a smile on your face. And the planets placed here often have a major role at determining what you enjoy. So let's take a closer look and break it down for all planets placed natally in the fifth house. My name is Anastasia. I'm a traditional Western astrologer specializing in natal relationship and predictive astrology. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe, leave me a like or a comment. It helps put my videos in front of other people. It helps encourage me, bring more videos your way, and it's just overall very fun to see, the responses you guys have. So please subscribe and, leave me some kindness. If you'd like to work with me and if you'd like to book a reading to understand yourself better, you can check out the link down below or go to my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. Additionally, I am someone who takes a very proactive role in astrology, must be my Jupiter in Aries. If you were born with some of the challenging placements, if you have Venus in Aries, Scorpio, or Virgo, if you have your Jupiter in Gemini, Virgo, or Capricorn, and any other challenging placement, the moon in Capricorn or Scorpio, and you want to work with that energy and you want to kind of bring some of the more positive vibes into your life, I highly recommend checking out my Planetary Magic shop. I create candles and I create oils that have magical properties. Basically, I carefully select the times when the planet is at its best condition, and that is usually a very small window, like of an hour or less, and then I capture it by creating these beautiful products. This is a Venus Kazemi. This one was created in October 2022, and it smells magical like apples, and it has copper foil in it. So highly recommend for anyone with Venus, like I said, Aries, Scorpio, or Virgo. And I'm Venus in Virgo, so, it's something that I use on a regular basis. So I've done a general video on the houses. I highly recommend you check it out before this one because it will give you a rounded view of what houses are in astrology and what they mean. I find that a lot of people actually look at the houses and get confused, which once you take a closer look at astrology, to me personally, it feels like one of the easier parts of astrology versus like, I could understand why aspects would be confusing. So do you have any planets in the fifth house? Today we're talking about the fifth house. If you do, let me know. If you don't, look at the planet that rules your fifth house, because no house is ever empty, right? There's always, if it's Capricorn, it's ruled by Saturn, so you would listen for Saturn. If it's Scorpio or Aries, I'm a traditional astrologer, it's ruled by Mars. If it's Taurus or Libra, Venus, etc. So check out the planet and listen for when I talk about the planets in the fifth house, listen for that planet. So fifth house, a little bit of the background, right? I think fifth house is pretty easy to understand because it's just a place of fun. So it's joyful. It's a good house. It's a succeedant house, meaning that it's the next in order to succeed. Houses rise from the first to the second to the third. So angular houses tend to be very dominant, right? So it's the house that is going to be angular next as the earth keeps spinning and the houses keep turning. So succeeding houses in astrology talk about the resources the person has. We talked about the second house. Check out my video on the second house. And second house, if the first house is you, second house is your resources. It's the possessions you have, the money you have. So here, if the fourth house is your foundations and your peace and your childhood, fifth house represents the resources that come out of it, or the resources that you learn to enjoy, right? Like fifth house is your creative energy. It's your children, which is the resource of a family, which is the fourth house. So it represents the ways in which you shine, the ways in which you play, how you play, what you enjoy. It's also the house of the house where Venus rejoices. Venus is, every planet has a house it enjoys. At least the 7 traditional planets, right? For Mercury, it's the first house. For the Sun, it's the 9th. For Venus, it's the 5th. And just thinking of the fact that the 5th house is the joy of Venus, you can imagine what kind of things will the house that Venus likes will hold. Just imagine that, like Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, what will it hold in it, right? So party times, getting together with friends, enjoying get-togethers, it holds love. Classically, 5th house is love and romance before marriage. It's kind of more, because Venus is not necessarily the most like marriage-oriented planet. The moon is, right? Like the moon is more like mother archetype. Venus is more let's have fun energy. So love, what you find attractive, what you find enjoyable. Sex is here, your attitude towards sex, your attitude towards fun, your attitude towards arts. Children are often very much determined by the 5th house. Sometimes you can see how many kids the person will have, but it's very, it's very kind of, everything depends on the rest of your chart. So once again, if you're listening to some of this and it says that it means you're going to have like 5 children because you have 5 planets in the 5th house and you don't have them, you got to look at the whole chart. And for that, I'd recommend booking a reading. So it's an exciting house. I think without further ado, we're just going to discuss it and we're going to talk about what different planets in the 5th house mean. So if you have your sun in the 5th house, the sun represents your identity, how you define yourself, like when you say I am. So in this case, your identity will be very much determined by being creative. So there's a lot of times like a strong artistic potential. Maybe you sing, maybe you dance, maybe you paint. It has to be like, it kind of gets enmeshed into your personality. Being a parent or being in a parental role towards people in your life, sort of, being a teacher often comes here as well. You are likely someone who enjoys the company of kids. Maybe you yourself are childlike, you kind of seek it out. You can be a parent who is very kind of bold and bright and generous. Like I said, very kind of interested in art and theater, maybe even sports, depending on the sign of your sun, but potentially, very athletic. The challenge here is being too proud, potentially, or too kind of looking at everything as a game, and that includes relationships, that includes romance, where you might always try to win because the sun is very much, there can only be one, right? There's only one sun that we look up to every day. So watch out for being too proudful. Yeah, too proudful. Is that, why do I mean, Mercury is still retrograde when I'm filming this, so maybe let's say that's the reason. Even though I have a Mercury candle, so. But yeah, make sure pride doesn't get in the way of happiness, and make sure you're not treating your partners as competitors. And you may be drawn to people who are like the sun, because 5th house represents attraction. It also represents your children, especially the first child, potentially. So the partners and the child can be bright and dramatic and fiery, like passionate, stubborn, potentially. So beware. And let me know if you have kids and that's your child, or if that's who you are attracted to. If you have your moon in the 5th house, there is some similarity to the sun, but the sun represents your wants, the moon represents your needs. So the moon in the 5th house will need to be creative. There's going to be a sense of like needing to express yourself, needing to paint, needing to sing, needing to listen to music. And like creativity can actually be comfort, right? Like going to a museum, going to a gallery, or painting is like a source of, it's like a blanket around you, right? You may need to have a child as well, or you may feel like children bring you a lot of joy and bring you a lot of peace. as well as, like emotionally kind of, I think because fifth house represents creativity and the moon represents emotions, your desire to be in the spotlight or your desire to be creative and your inspiration can kind of ebb and flow, right? Because that's the nature of the moon. It tends to be full and then it's less full. We have a full moon, we have a new moon. So similarly, your need to be creative or need to be visible can alternate, go up and down. Your children and romantic interests are likely to be emotional, moody, potentially, right? And that would also apply, like if you are a Pisces rising and you have Cancer in your fifth house, you may be drawn to emotional people more so than rational people. And you will either kind of seek people who mother you or you mother them. So there might be like a very strong nurturing energy within you or the energy that you seek. And like I said, similarly, the child can be very kind of moody and have a lot of like mood swings potentially. For those with Mercury in the fifth house, you're drawn to chatty people. You want and need a partner who can talk and you can talk to, not like anyone who is silent. A silent type is not for you. Because you are very like, with Mercury in the fifth house, you're likely to be very busy. You're likely to be a creative thinker, a creative problem solver. Maybe you like to talk and not just talk for the sake of conversation, but like you can be a speech writer, a teacher, a creative writer, right? There's definitely a possibility for self-expression through your verbal skills. And likely you have them in abundance. Of course, depends on the other placements. If you have Mercury conjunct Saturn, Mercury opposite Saturn, they might take a little bit longer to show up. You enjoy puzzles. You are likely to enjoy games. Yeah, like board games, anything like that. Like I said, very kind of quick, creative thinker. You may have a very intelligent and talkative relationship with your children or any other children. You may treat them as an equal and kind of, converse with them, and the child is likely to be chatty too. So let me know if that's the case. Let me know if you have Mercury in the fifth house and you feel like it describes you really well. For those with Venus in the fifth house, if you have Venus in the fifth house, you are in luck. Fifth house is the joy of Venus. So having Venus in the fifth house means that you have a planet in the house she loves and she feels very comfortable in. Of course, Venus in Aries, Scorpio, or Virgo will be a bit more complicated. That's why I highly recommend getting Venus Cazimi, Venus in Libra, or even Moonlit Trinity candle, because they all have strong Venuses, can help, kind of uplift some of the more challenging sides of this placement. But in general, fifth house is a place of fun. Venus loves fun, so you will have a more strong attunement to creativity, to pleasure, to sex, like sex and joy and art will be more important to you. You may have a creative talent, and if you have this placement, let me know. Do you paint? Do you act? Do you sing? And what sign is your Venus in? So you will be drawn to do things in life that you enjoy more so than things that you have to do. And you may be sort of overindulge a bit, right, into things that you like, whatever they might be. It might be overindulging in sex, overindulging in sugary foods or drinks, etc. So be mindful with this placement, because that could be a more challenging side of it. If you're not super artistic yourself, I think having some kind of element of creativity and art around you is really important. Children become very important. You're likely to be someone who maybe even can feel as yourself in the company of the children, and like have a great time, connect with them. Because Venus represents the fifth house and she's a very charming planet and beautiful, you're likely to be attracted to beautiful people, Libra, Taurus risings, people with Venus in the first house. or Libra, Taurus, suns and moons, right? Or any other placement. Don't quote me on that. I think there's so many definitions of what beautiful is. It's very personal. But Libra and Taurus risings are classically considered Venus-ruled children. So that those could represent the types you are drawn to. But definitely someone charming in whatever you find attractive way. And the first child is likely to be charming, or one of your kids is likely to be very like creative, charming, artistic. Now, if you have Mars in the 5th house, Mars represents tension and conflict and drama. So sometimes this could mean that there is a bit of a romantic tension, right? Maybe that results in passionate lovemaking. Maybe you're sort of someone who seeks to talk it out, battle it out, converse about it with your partner, and then that results in expressing the passionate energy. But sometimes you can definitely have more conflicts in your relationships. Being good at problem solving, or being good at figuring out any kind of, if there's a creative block, or if your child is going through a hard time, Mars will take a very active approach where it's like, I know, let me do it. Let me tell you how. So it's a very kind of quick, on point placement. You may be more competitive, more kind of like competitive with your lovers, so be on the lookout for that, or you may draw people who are more competitive. Being an athlete comes with this placement a lot of times, where you may be someone who is winning awards, or have won a lot of awards as like a runner in school, for example. And because 5th house represents children, a child who is active, kind of strong, brave, courageous is also likely. If you have Jupiter in the 5th house, Jupiter is the planet of growth and optimism and abundance and good luck. So here Jupiter expands all of the 5th house significations to bring good luck. So you may find good luck through your child, through your partner, through creativity, right? There's kind of more joy in those matters, and also more opportunities that can come to you through those matters. You may seek activities that actually teach you something, because Jupiter has that guru energy, and maybe even be like extra open-minded, because I think Jupiter has that understanding energy, so you can be more open-minded when it comes to your child and what they're going through, when it comes to love, when it comes to your romantic interests, etc. So it's a really, really lovely placement for being a parent, having a child who is like jovial and optimistic, and maybe becomes the teacher, and you connect with them and get along, and even all kinds of creative pursuits can be extra lucky for you. But Jupiter can blow things out of proportion, so once again, make sure you're not overdoing things, taking too many risks, eating too many unhealthy things, gambling, spending too much money, etc. So if you have Saturn in the 5th house, or if Saturn rules your 5th house, that's, a bit more complicated, because Saturn is the planet of restriction and fear and cautiousness, and 5th house is the place of play. So it's not necessarily immediately easy. You're likely to experience more blockages. Maybe you are someone who's like a late bloomer, maybe sexually you're sort of repressed initially, or you're more like restrictive internally. Like Saturn wants things to be serious. Saturn like is not necessarily a fan of like light affairs, right? So Saturn here might limit affairs. So maybe you're just kind of going for the first person you dated in high school, you marry them, right? And also like Saturn tends to build things that are long lasting. So your relationships can be longer lasting, and when they break, it hurts more, but then also kind of, the next relationship is also long lasting, and it doesn't have to break. The positives here, right, is that you're able to take things from the conception to the end. You have that ability to persevere, endure, approach things with patience. And Saturn in the fifth house urges you to be kind of structured with your creativity. You're not someone who can just wing it. Maybe you can, but you also need to be like, you need to make sure that you have a strategy. So you're not someone who's just like, go with the flow type. And you can actually benefit from having more structure. You're not likely to be a gambler. Saturn, hello, you're likely to be someone who's very serious, right? Children can come later in life, and there might be a bit more delays or a bit more, kind of things you have to figure out when you have a child, because Saturn in general is like slow, steady, kind of problem solving, sometimes hardship. So I think like your relationship with kids will likely also maybe like be developing with delays, or it will take a little bit longer to get on track. And if you have Saturn in the fifth house, please let me know what kind of experience you have with it. Maybe you had your first child in your 20s. Maybe you have a powerful Saturn in Libra or Capricorn. And if you have a weaker Saturn in Leo, in Cancer, or Aries, I would highly recommend getting my Saturn in Aquarius candle. I don't have it right next to me, but it's Saturn in Aquarius conjunct Venus, so it's softer and more supportive. For those with Uranus in the fifth house, so one thing, immediately you're someone who's attracted to different people. You may even shock people in your life with who you're dating, or with the stories of your dating life, like, just being, I don't know, jet setting around the world, dating people, trying different things, experimenting in your relationship. So you're not someone who's like interested in vanilla, regular type relationships. And, it's kind of your strength, I think, because you don't necessarily care about what other people think. And, you shouldn't care if it's not hurting those people. So you are someone, quirky, you're attracting quirky people, you're very creative, you can think differently, kind of be like a math scientist in the laboratory creating different things. Your art can be disruptive and different and eye-opening, which is quite exciting. Romantically, there could be a decent amount of twists and turns before you settle and find someone, and your relationships can be very unorthodox. Not only you're dating someone who's different, but maybe you are in a relationship with someone and you don't live together, or you live in different towns and you see each other 3 times a year. So very kind of unique energy, but initially it could be more sudden infatuations, dramatic endings. Children, in terms of kids, your child could be very Uranian. Someone like genius, eccentric, different, but potentially more like accident prone. So maybe you'll need to, surround them with foamy things, then wrap your house in like blankets or something like that. But they definitely have the potential to be someone who shakes the world up. Neptune in the fifth house is very creative, very dreamy. But sometimes can be like, there could be creative energy that is a bit hard to focus. So you need to be more structured with your pursuits. There is more of an ability to create magical romance or to attract magical romance. Of course, as always with Neptune, the fantasy is not always the same as reality. So you may be someone who is kind of idealistic romantically. You may see people for their wounds and see the potential in them, but then forget to notice the reality of things. So you really need to be more careful and kind of work on your boundaries. Don't fall in love with people because of who they can be. Make sure you also notice who they are and how they treat you. Be mindful of attracting like wounded people and choosing wounded people. At the same time, if it is that person, you can be very imaginative, very creative, very kind of loving and generous, and if you find the person who shows you that in return, then you won a lottery. You both are creative, imaginative, and you can have a fantastical romance. But, you know, like I said, be warned of the more shadow sides of it. Very creative, so it could be beautiful for writing, singing, acting. And the child is likely to be dreamy, imaginative, artistic as well, or you may actually even adopt a child. Now, if you have Pluto in the 5th house, your kid is likely to be intense and dramatic and kind of even stubborn or like powerful somehow. Pluto is a planet of transformations. 5th house is the place of love, so you may go through quite a few transformations when it comes to romance, you know, where like your relationship turns and changes and you grow through it. A child can transform you as well and can bring a very different color to your life, something that maybe you had no idea what it's going to be like. So this could be a very important experience of your life. Pluto oftentimes represents what we are obsessive about. So I've seen this be an example of like being obsessed with the idea of being a parent, being sort of obsessed about creativity, or just sort of watch out for the 5th house as in like more dangerous sides of the 5th house, right? Like gambling, maybe spending money recklessly, maybe some kind of bad habits. You need to keep those under control. And Pluto represents secretive things, right? Like Pluto is always kind of things we don't necessarily talk about. So there might be more shadows when it comes to your sex life, more shadows when it comes to your children, or like things you just don't discuss. Even matters connected to, you know, to your childhood potentially. You may run into people getting obsessed with you more. And let me know if this resonates in the comments below and you have Pluto in the 5th house. Finally, if you have Chiron in the 5th house, even though Chiron is not a planet, I figured we'll talk about him anyways because I did it in the previous videos. So Chiron represents the wound we have, the weaker, vulnerable side of ourselves, which we all have somewhere in our natal chart, right? Like nobody can escape the wounding in one shape or the other. So Chiron in the 5th house is sometimes a sign of having to grow up too soon, because 5th house is the place of play, and like not having enough opportunities to express yourself, not being able to be a child, not being able to be playful. Maybe you had parents who sort of controlled what you can and cannot do. You know, they could have told you, don't do this, don't do that, you're not going to be like successful. Maybe there was a sense of them blocking your creativity and sort of not encouraging that and grounding you a lot more. So now you may doubt your creativity. There might be issues with children, you know, sometimes like an issue with being a parent, like fears connected to being a parent, fears that maybe you're not going to be that great or good of a parent because you've experienced some challenges. At the same time, Chiron always blesses us and it always gives us a gift. So the truth is that it is quite likely that you can be very creative and you can be a wonderful parent, and building relationships with children, becoming a parent, is actually your path towards healing and towards building a better self-esteem. So you can be someone who is very wonderful at helping other people feel taken care of, feel protected, feel nurtured. So make sure you're not just applying it to other people, and apply some of that to yourself. So this is it. We've traveled through the 5th house. Thank you for listening till the end if you have, and let me know if you resonated. 6th house is next, so I'll talk to you very soon.